Hello and welcome to another edition of the Plympton Podcast, the town's online community audio magazine. I'm Andrew Hill. Coming up this time, we hear about a planning application for a new Mothercare store in Plympton. A local councillor defends criticisms of the council's handling of certain roadworks schemes. We have items from Plympton Academy's Celebration of Success Night, and of course it's now the season of summer flower and produce shows.
The Plympton Podcast.
We start at the Plympton Fuchsia and Geranium Group's summer show, where Chairman Ian Curzon-Berners gave me his reflections of this year's event.
A lot better than we were expecting, but generally speaking, considering the weather, it's been horrendous for growing. I mean, it's been very hot then, very cold then, obviously very wet. And we've also had to deal with an awful lot of bugs and bits and pieces in between as well, which has literally decimated quite a lot of people's plants, which is one of these things you just got to put up with, unfortunately, but it is hard going. But generally speaking, we've had a very good show, and it's all down to the new members that have been coming through, because they've put an awful lot more in this year than they have in previous years, and they've reaped the rewards, i.e. getting first and seconds for it.
Now, you mentioned the weather conditions and bugs and so on. I was talking to one of your members here this morning, and she was a bit upset she wasn't able to put anything in because her flowers have been caught with whitefly this year. What sort of thing can members do to try and combat that situation?
The annoying part is that a lot of the things that are going around on fuchsias at the present moment in time, it depends whether you're one of these ones that like spraying. If you spray, I mean, there is lots of stuff in, like obviously the garden centres and things like that, but the problem is there is an awful lot of bad press going around about the sprays that are on the market, which is quite justly so, because I mean some of the stuff that you put in there is poison at the end of the day, and you're spraying it around, so a lot of people are sort of like umming and ahhing what should they do. Unfortunately, it's a hard one to judge, because the thing is, I've had whitefly on some of my stuff, and it's just a question of what time you catch them during the day, whether they're active or sleeping. If they're sleeping, great, you can squish the little toe rags, but unfortunately it depends what time. If they're up and later in the day, that they'll be flying around and you can't do nothing about it. But
now, you mentioned the rain, and unfortunately in the last couple of days we've had quite heavy rainfall. How frustrating is it as a grower to have your pride and joy, all the hours you put in to maintain their shape and so on, and then a couple of days before the show starts, it's affected by heavy rain?
Well, the thing is, I mean, a lot of the bigger growers, I mean, it's hard work for myself, because I don't tend to have a garden. I've got a small courtyard, and there is literally no cover. But I mean, even some of the other ones that are throwing in some of the big plants, they've literally grown out of the greenhouse as such, so they've had to put them outside. So whereas at the start of the year, well, we'll say the start of the year, it was about a month or so ago, we had a really strong heat wave which scorched a lot of the plants, affected them badly. Then they had leaf drop, then the buds wouldn't open, and it was like one of these things. Then you have to round it off with, had a torrential downpour, you have to sort of like say, take that sort of thing. So I mean, against that backdrop, it's quite amazing we've managed to get the volume of blooms that we've got on the show here today. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it had been a slightly, I wouldn't say better year, I mean, we've had a good year, I can't complain about it, but I think all in all, I mean, you're going to get your good years and your bad years, and I think this year, on average, it's been a good year. I don't think we could have asked for any more, and like I say, a lot of the new ones that have been putting stuff in, I mean, they've shown some of the bigger growers that they're out to mean business. That's
quite interesting. I was speaking to Nick over lunch here this afternoon, and he obviously has exhibited at a national level, and is someone people I think try to beat. And he said, a lot of his focus was off the newcomers, and suddenly they've come up and given them a real run for their money this year.
Exactly. I mean, it's nice to see, because I mean, no matter what club you're in and what you're doing, you're always looking at new members coming through, because they're the lifeblood of what we do, sort of thing. And it's nice to see. Yes, Nick has won Best in Show for I think the last 2 years now, but I mean, there are also an awful lot of good growers out there, and when you sort of like concentrate so much on what you're doing, and you see the new member coming through who says I'm a beginner and comes along and beats you, you think, oh, oops.
And from the way things are gone here today, it looks as though people can surprise themselves, because I know you were telling me this morning there was a new member who joined last year very pessimistic as to whether they would be able to exhibit and win things, and yet they've gone on, I think, to take a second prize today.
Well, there's 3 out of the new members that have come through last night, and I mean, justifiably so. I mean, all 3 of them were doing like stewarding, which is like helping out the judges, and all 3 of them went out last night with big smiles on their faces saying, we've either got a first or a second. They were chuffed to bits, and I think justifiably so, that they got their rewards. I mean, it is a little bit time consuming, don't get me wrong, but for what time they've put into it, I think they've got the rewards back out of it.
The impact of various roadworks in the area, including those at Deep Lane End, were discussed recently at a full meeting of the Plymouth City Council. Deputy Council Leader Patrick Nicholson challenged the Labour group's view that the council's handling of the roadworks had been unacceptable.
I do take personally, obviously, the major traffic schemes within the city, and as I'm sure through you, Lord Mayor, Councillor Coker would agree, they are among the most difficult elements of delivery for a local authority because so many people on a daily basis are affected. And also there are aspects of delivery which are out of the control of the local authority. So there can be works being undertaken on the highway that go wrong, that have an immediate impact, which we've seen at Derriford. I won't accept that they're unacceptable because we have, as a local authority, endeavoured throughout the implementation of all the major traffic schemes within the city, sought to be as open and transparent and to communicate as far as possible to members of the public and members about the schemes being implemented. And that's why I won't accept the words have been unacceptable, because despite much effort of officers in the department I'm responsible for and numerous articles in the local media, there still will always be a section of the population that won't necessarily be fully aware of what's going on in a highway scheme. Now, if I just talk in general terms and focus on Forder Valley and Deep Lane, and the leader will address the Derriford scheme so we don't overlap. But generally, I think we all recognise that these major schemes, if we're to deliver the level of economic growth and housing development in the city, have to be implemented. And this local authority has been very successful in drawing down monies from central government through the LEP to implement these schemes. So the schedule is quite important. If we don't deliver in accordance with the schedule, we'll lose the funding. And that's a very pertinent point. But the delivery of these schemes, clearly there is a plan, but we have seen on a number of the schemes potentially those daily impacts that there are lessons to be learnt. And I'm very, very happy to be attending scrutiny on Wednesday, along with officers, to give a full presentation of where we're on all the schemes. My door's always been open, and I'm very happy to be held to account with officers on our implementation of the schemes that the City Council is responsible for. But we are not responsible for Deep Lane. As a Plympton councillor, my colleagues in Plympton have been as exasperated as, no doubt, all the Plympton residents and beyond at the slowness of delivery on the part of the County Council. So I hope the second sentence, there is a subtle difference, Councillor Taylor, in holding Plymouth councillors to account for schemes we're responsible for, but holding to account those who are responsible for schemes that are not our responsibility. And in terms of Forder Valley, as it's in the motion, there have been a series of engagement activities at the Elm Community Centre in September, Windsor House and Crown Hill Library, at which the public and councillors have indeed been invited to attend. So at the very earliest part of the scheme, involvement has been sought. But I am disappointed, Lord Mayor, that of the members of this council, only those that sit around me have actually engaged in terms of coming to me or coming to the officers that report to me on specific concerns. Now, Councillor Taylor, you're very general in the comments that you make. I can assure you that there's been direct contact with residents who you represent, and indeed members opposite represent, as well as colleagues on this side of the council chamber. Equally, businesses have been in direct contact, and I've had personal meetings with certain businesses, along with council officers, to try and resolve on the ground issues of concern. And so I would welcome, perhaps not in public, unless you want to divulge it in public, a more specific conversation about your concerns. You represent a ward that is affected, but you have never come to me, and my understanding is you have not contacted officers that report to me on any concerns about any resident that you represent. And I'm disappointed in that. You know, we've been around long enough to know that my door's always open to address these issues, as indeed Councillor Coker was for opposition members when he was in charge. And so I'd hope you take this opportunity through scrutiny. I look forward to seeing Councillor Bowie and her colleagues on Wednesday to have a thorough review. And if we can learn lessons, particularly in communication, then we'll need to do so. But ultimately, these schemes have to be delivered, and if we don't deliver them, we'll lose the money and Plymouth will be the poorer.
An application has recently come before city planners to vary planning restrictions on one of the proposed new units on the site of the old Legacy International Hotel at Marsh Mills. The application was brought to facilitate Mothercare relocating from its city centre store to the new Marsh Mills unit. Council Officer Ali Wagstaff outlined the proposal to the Planning Committee members.
It seeks to amend Condition 30, which restricted those 4 units to purely bulky goods sales. The condition, which is currently on the development site, is set out for you on page 76 of the committee report. During the course of the application, officers have involved in significant negotiations with the applicant, which has ended up with a significant changing of that condition. That new wording is set out for you on page 77 of the agenda pack, but I'll just go through the basic details of that. What that condition allows the applicant to do is that it allows a further range of bulky goods, which are specific to children and babies, as the main bulky uses in that site. It then allows a further additional area of floor space to be used for other ancillary goods on that premises. And that relates to goods which are specifically related to children under 10 and the needs of maternity wear for pregnant ladies. Just before we go into the detailed consideration of the application, I just need to make members clear that a lot of the documentation associated with the application relates specifically to Mothercare. I just need to draw members' attention to the fact that planning permission runs with the land, and what we're considering here is not about Mothercare's occupation of this unit, but whether, bearing in mind the condition which is set out for you on page 77, it's about the type of operator that operate under that condition. And while Mothercare could potentially do that, there are other operators, such as kiddie care and mamas and papas, who could equally be the beneficial users of such planning permission. In relation to the planning application, we've received a letter of representation from the Plymouth City Centre Company, and they raised concerns over the relaxation of the planning condition and the precedent it could set, the availability of sites within the city centre, and the impact on the city centre. We've had another consultation response from the Council's Economic Development Department, and they relate, and that is again an objection which relates to the impact of the proposal on the city centre and the potential precedent it could set. The key considerations for members to take into account in this application relate to retail matters associated with the sequential test, the impact test, and the city's retail strategy, as well as matters relating to highways considerations and that on residential amenity. The retail considerations are set out in detail for you on page 79 to 87 of the agenda report, but I'm going to go through some of the basic details for you just to make sure you're fully informed. In relation to the sequential test, which is about where retail and other town centre development should be located, officers are of the viewpoint that the applicant has adequately demonstrated flexibility in how they've applied this test, and also that there are locational requirements specific to the proposal which need to be taken into consideration. In looking at the sequential test, officers are satisfied that while there are potentially available sites in the city centre, they are not necessarily suitable for the proposal and its requirements. In relation to the wider network of existing local and district centres in the city, officers are again satisfied that there are no suitable and available sites for the proposal. Consideration therefore needs to turn to the Derriford proposed district centre and whether or not the proposal could be located in that area. Of specific reference in this regard is obviously the new requirements of Policy Ply 38 to the Joint Local Plan, which allocates a site should the JLP be adopted for the district centre. Officers have considered the evidence presented to them in relation to this site and other considerations and are satisfied that there aren't either sites within that area which are suitable and available for the proposed site, and I can give you further detail if you do need that later on. So officers are satisfied in relation to this application of the sequential test that it's been passed by the applicant. Consideration therefore moves on to the retail impact of the scheme on the investment in the network of centres and also the impact on the vitality and viability of those centres. In this regard, we've taken expert guidance from GVA who provide assistance to the authority in detailed retail matters. And the information they provided us with is that in considering the impact of the scheme, both on its own and cumulatively with other developments, is that the original planning permission as granted, if we were considering it now, would have a 3.1% impact on the trade of the city centre. With the implications of the amendment of the condition, that would rise to 3.5% impact. And as such, you can see that the amendment of this condition would have a 0.4% impact on the overall trade level of the city centre. Both officers and GVA who advise them consider that this impact is not significantly adverse, which is the test of the MPPF. Consideration then needs to be given to whether the impacts of the scheme cumulatively with other developments would likely result in a significant adverse impact. In this regard, officers would draw members' attention to the decision which has been made back in 2006 for an application 15/01831 full, which was an application which identified for the occupation of Next. At that committee, officers advised members that they considered that application would have a significant adverse impact on both the vitality and viability of the city centre and also investment within the centre. That remains officers' viewpoint in relation to the commitments. The consideration we therefore need to give in this application in relation to its cumulative impacts is whether the additional impact that this proposal would have would alter that significant adverse impact significantly. Officers' viewpoints, as advised by GVA, is that this application will not materially alter that impact, and as such in relation to this scheme, its impact is considered to not be significantly adverse. In relation to the wider network of centres and the proposed district centres, officers are satisfied that there won't be a significant adverse impact on those centres or the proposed district centre by virtue of this application. In retail terms, consideration therefore falls back on the retail strategy set out in both the core strategy and the joint local plan. Officers are of the viewpoint that this application would not give rise to a conflict with that overarching strategy. I would, however, point out that were Mothercare to leave the city centre and be relocating here, it would be a loss, but that's not necessarily a matter for the application, and we do still feel that it would be acceptable in that regard. As such, officers feel in retail terms that the application is acceptable. Turning now to the other matters under consideration, those relate to the amenity of the surrounding occupiers and the highways implications of the proposal. Officers do not feel that the alteration to the condition would significantly alter the arrangements in those regards, and as such there are no potential conflicts. As such, officers' recommendation to members is that the application should be conditionally approved, subject to the additional condition 41, which is set out in the agenda pack, and as such the recommendation is of conditional approval subject to that condition and the other conditions already placed on the application. Thank you.
In an ancient stunnery town, with programmes just for you, the Plympton Podcast.
This message isn't aimed at you. You know that on a motorway, a red X above any lane means that you can't drive in it and could be prosecuted if you do. But apparently, there are some drivers who don't realise this and are a danger to themselves and to other road users. So those drivers do need to know that a red X above any lane means that the lane may be blocked by a broken down vehicle, emergency services or road workers. For more details, they should search online for smart motorways and never drive in any lane with a red X above it.
Hello, I'm Bob Lowe. After 65 years of marriage, my wife died of Alzheimer's disease, and I found out the meaning of loneliness. I'd like to tell you about the Silver Line. It was launched by Esther Ranson, which is the only free, confidential 24-hour helpline for older people, the Silver Generation. There are no strict limits, but most people who contact the line are over 65. You can ring the free phone number at 08004 70 80 90 at any time of the day or night, and the volunteers there will be happy to offer information, point you in the right direction for the groups and services that exist locally, or simply have a chat. So, if you feel lonely, ring 08004 70 80 90.
Andrew Hill. Each year, Plympton Academy, the new name for Ridgeway School, awards a cup in memory of John Paul Oxley, a former pupil who passed away at a young age from cystic fibrosis. The presentation of this year's award was made at the Academy's Celebration of Success evening.
He was often seen on lucky days and out of school wearing his Sheffield Wednesday shirts, and I think that was a passionate supporter, it's fair to say. In honour of John Paul, since he passed away, we've had an annual five-a-side football tournament, which has been supported by the PE department, and the winners of that tournament win something which is very special, called the Oxley Cup. So at this point, what I'd quite like to do is perhaps just invite Mr. Andrew Price up onto the stage. You're here, Mr. Price? Ready, sir. All right, you're all ready. He's going to say a few words, because the next few awards aren't just based on the five-a-side tournament, but also the PE awards, and he's going to pull in some of his colleagues to help him out. Okay, Mr. Price. Mr. Harvey, who's going to say a few words about the winners of the Oxford Cup. Jill, if I can ask you to come up and present that bit of silverware after Mr. Harvey, I'm sure will delight us with his eloquence. Mr. Harvey.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say how honoured I am to present this award. And one of the things that I found really, really interesting is that when we told the students that were part of the tournament, part of the Oxford Cup, the importance of this, they really embraced it, and they really wanted to win it, not just because they wanted to win, but also for John Paul. The team that won it showed great commitment, great team ethic, and they beat my tutor group in the final, which I'm not gutted about at all. The team that won, the team that should be very proud of winning this award, and there's a few students from that team here today. 7RTH.
Back now to the Planning Committee, where Mothercare's agent Adrian Fox is addressing councillors.
Good afternoon, Chair, fellow councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to address you today. As I said, I'm the planning agent dealing with the application today. I'd also like to add that the intended retail operator, Mothercare, is also in attendance today, underlining the importance of this application and their desire to retain their presence in Plymouth. The application site is a location that the City Council has accepted as being appropriate for large format retail warehousing, following the grant of planning permission for 5 new retail units in December 2013. The development, which is to be known as Plymouth Gateway Retail Park, will deliver some 7,900 square metres of Class A1 retail floor space. The application before you this afternoon does not seek any increase in retail floor space over and above that permitted, nor does it seek to increase the number of units within the retail park. It simply proposes a modest widening of goods that can be sold from Unit 1. No other retail units are affected. The additional range of goods is required by Mothercare, who have signed a new lease on Unit 1, and the completion of the lease is subject to obtaining planning consent. Mothercare is very keen to retain a presence in Plymouth, but their current city centre store at Drake Circus no longer meets the needs of their retail business. The existing unit is half the size of Unit 1 and it cannot be extended. Significantly, it does not allow Mothercare to provide the full range of goods and services expected by their customers. The nature of Mothercare's operation means that the characteristics and nature of the goods sold is the same as traditional large format bulky goods operators, which can only trade from certain locations. This point has been accepted by the City Council in permitting the baseline consent. These fundamental operational requirements cannot be provided within Mothercare's existing store. As such, the existing store does not provide a long-term, commercially viable option. For Mothercare to retain their presence in Plymouth, alternative premises are required. As part of the application submission, a thorough assessment of alternative, more central sites has been provided. This demonstrates that no sequentially preferable site exists that is available and suitable for the proposal. This assessment includes the former BHS store at Cornwall Street. This position has been accepted by officers in their consideration of the application. In terms of retail impact, the wider range of goods proposed to be sold will continue to be restricted and predominantly comprise the sale of bulky goods. As mentioned, only Unit 1 is affected. We have worked closely with officers to agree a planning condition to restrict the future use of the unit and minimise any adverse impact. These restrictions include a cap on the floor space allowed to be used for sale of clothing, footwear and accessories of no more than 465 square metres, restricting the sale of clothing and footwear for children up to 10 years of age, restrictions on the sale of toys, games and party equipment for babies and children from a maximum area of 93 square metres, and a restriction of the floor space of the additional goods that are not considered bulky to be sold from less than half the permitted floor space. With these controls in place, the future use of the unit will be strictly controlled. Given the nature of the goods to be sold, the impact of the proposal on the vitality and viability will not be materially different to that which was already deemed acceptable by the City Council in permitting the original consent. This has been recognised by officers and their retail planning advisors. In addition, in terms of the future use of the existing Mothercare store, It is important to note that Mothercare has been approached by the landlord on previous occasions as a result of retailers interested in occupying the unit. In addition, Mothercare also has a keep open clause in its lease, which ensures that the unit will be not vacated prior to the end of its lease without a deal with its current landlord. As a result, there is very little chance of the Drake Circus unit being left vacant. Therefore, the viability and vitality of the shopping centre and the wider city centre will not be adversely affected. Likewise, the nature of development will not adversely impact upon future and planned investment. There is very little overlap in the goods proposed to be sold by Mothercare and the nature of investment coming forward elsewhere, such as the new district centre of Derriford or the Drake Circus leisure scheme in the city centre. Again, the absence of any impact on future investment has been accepted by officers and their retail planning advisors in their consideration of the application. The retail part will continue to be for sale of predominantly bulky goods that will complement the city centre's existing offer. The proposals will allow Mothercare to trade...
1 minute remaining.
Mothercare to trade from viable premises which will retain its presence in Plymouth, maintaining choice for local residents and demonstrate continued confidence from retailers to invest in the local area. The applicant is ready to bring forward this important development to Plymouth, and to do this as quickly as possible. Indeed, alongside this application, relevant planning conditions are being discharged and contracts have been secured for the remaining units to deliver bulky goods operators who are not currently represented in the area. The delivery of Plymouth Gateway Retail Park will also bring important jobs to the area and represent significant private sector investment to Plymouth in excess of £25 million. The application is recommended for approval and I hope you're able to support your officer's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
While adult entries in the Plympton Fuchsia and Geranium Group's summer show are restricted to entries from their own members, they have an open section for children. Ian Curzon-Berners told me more about it.
Well, the thing is with the children's category, I mean, this is one thing that I brought in and I said, look, I'm happy to get the children's category up and running and obviously sponsor it. Now, the thing is, children, whether they carry on for the next couple of years and forget about growing, that's the way things go. But if they come along in about another 10, 15 years and say, look, hey, I won something here this time, I want to carry on, that's what we're looking for. Because the thing is, the children are what gardening is all about. I mean, they've lost interest in it, unfortunately, with computers and bits and pieces. But if we can get them back into doing a bit of green finger and bits and pieces like that, and I think the added bonuses, especially with me sponsoring it, they do get a cash prize at the end of the day. And when the first prize gets £20, I mean, that is a bit of an incentive to go and...
Yeah, and I gather a number of schools have taken part this year.
Well, there were two originally. I don't know who off the top of my head, because I know it was Sam Brown that organised the two schools. But unfortunately, one didn't show, one of these things, and the other one that did show, which I was really, really pleased with, they, I think, had 20 plants to put in and 17 of them came in.
Wow.
So that's a good ratio. I'm very pleased with that, so can't complain about that one bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening coincidentally to National Radio this morning. There was a comment there about the way houses are built these days with small gardens. People are tending not to do so much gardening. How do you find that as a problem here in the group?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I've got the added benefit because I do run my own business with the gardening. I do tend to see what is going on. A lot of the older ones around the Plymouth or Plymouth area do have quite big gardens, but it's like the age group between the 40 to 50 and upwards group who are, whether it's unfortunate or not, they don't tend to have gardens. What gardens they do have are very small and it's just grass, and you try and say to them, would you like to start growing plants? And then, well, where do we put them? That's the main thing. It's like, where do we put the
But
plants?
I suppose pots is the answer to that.
Well, pots is the answer, but I mean, if you, as you've seen around on some of our tables, I mean, one of the big pots at the end there would more likely take up half their garden sort of thing. So it's a bit of a sort of like something to work on. I'm not too sure how to do it yet, but I mean, there are people out there that want to become members, and quite justifiably so, because they've all come up to me so far today and said, we like fuchsias, how do you grow them? Well, what are you doing so far? And they've shown us what they're doing so far, and literally, like I said to your young lady earlier on, that is the first step. I mean, if you can grow that, why can't you go up to the next step? And the thing is, going up to the next step is more fun, because then you've got a bit of competition, it's enjoyable, and you do reap the rewards at the end of it.
Author George Mahood was the guest speaker recently at Plympton Academy's Celebration of Success Night. He told the audience about being diagnosed with a spinal cord tumour and how he overcame the difficulties this presented to him.
So I've written 3 books, I was an author, and life felt like it was pretty good. I then started suffering from back pain, which got progressively worse over the following year, to the extent I was unable to do any form of physical exercise. After a series of MRI scans and doctor's visits, I was diagnosed with a spinal cord tumour. In April 2015, I had surgery to remove the tumour, which thankfully was a great success. I was required to lie horizontally in hospital for 72 hours to prevent a fluid leak. It was while lying there, I realised I had two options. I could either spend the following days, weeks and months feeling sorry for myself, believing that my body would never be as strong as it once was, or I could use an excuse to turn things around and make myself stronger. So I signed up for an Ironman. An Ironman is a long-distance triathlon consisting of a 2.4-mile open water swim, a 112-mile bike ride and a 26.2-mile run, all back-to-back within 17 hours. At the time, I'd never swum more than a length of front crawl without stopping. I'd never ridden a proper road bike. I'd never cycled at anywhere near the speed needed to cover the distance in the required time. And I'd never even worn lycra. I wasn't even allowed to consider running for the first 10 weeks of my recovery. And the Ironman I signed up was a little over 4 months after my surgery date. I didn't know if I'd complete it or even make it to the start line, but I knew I'd be stronger, both physically and mentally, than if I didn't try. And those 4 months proved to be one of the best adventures I've ever been on. My first challenge was trying to eat beans, peas, sweet corn and gravy lying down. I failed absolutely spectacularly. The food went everywhere. So I came home from hospital and then spent the first few weeks gradually building up my strength. First started sort of walking, gradually building up my strength. I then started swimming, had a couple of lessons and watched lots of YouTube videos about swimming and developed this unique front crawl breaststroke hybrid stroke. All the while I tried not to focus and get overwhelmed by the end goal of the Ironman. I just wanted to enjoy the journey, and whether I finished it or not, that was another matter. I just knew I was getting stronger all the time. I then started trying to increase my cycling endurance and speed. 4 months after surgery, I went to France and took part in Ironman Vichy. Temperatures hit about 40 degrees Celsius, there was a vicious headwind, I suffered hallucinations and dehydration, and every old injury I'd ever had throughout my life came back to haunt me during the course of the day. But surprisingly, my back was fine. The human body is incredibly resilient, and we're all capable of far more than we realise. So since the Ironman, I've decided to keep setting myself more and more different challenges. Last year I did my first ultramarathon, which was a 36-mile run along the southwest coast path. It was 60-mile-an-hour winds, knee-deep mud and flooded bridleways. It was completely treacherous. People were slipping over everywhere. We had to run all the way down to the bottom of those trees. My friend Mark and I, with the red rucksack, we were watching people slip over. We thought the easiest way maybe would just be to sort of take a running jump and slide all the way down on our backsides. And we ended up where the guy in the white was and turned around and everyone was copying us. So that was a much better way down. Then I also last year I did the River Dart 10k swim. I still don't like swimming. That's 6.2 miles down the river, about 3 hours in the water. Not much fun. And in fact, a lot of these endurance events aren't fun in the slightest, but there's nothing beats the sense of achievement when you accomplish something that you didn't think was possible. And crossing that finish line every single time makes every bit of pain and every bit of suffering during it worthwhile. And it's the same with writing books. I've written 5 books now. Everyone's a bit of a slog and stuff, but that sense of achievement when you upload a book onto Amazon and you realise you're a published author is an incredibly exciting achievement. So I think it's important for all of us to keep setting ourselves challenges and trying to keep that sense of adventure alive as we go through life. It's really important. But adventures don't have to be cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats in your pants. They don't have to be Ironman or ultramarathon events. An adventure is defined as any exciting or unusual experience. Weirdly, even speaking here tonight is an adventure for me. I'm terrified of public speaking, so this is an adventure for me. So I think it's important you do something you've never done before. Go somewhere you've never been. Say yes to something that you perhaps normally say no to. Challenge yourself. Conquer a fear. And if you challenge yourself in some way, however big or small, the adventure will follow. Congratulations to all of you for everything you've achieved, guys. It's absolutely phenomenal. Well done. Thank you very much.
We're in an ancient stunnery town with programs just for you. The Plympton Podcast.
The lad's holiday could have been great. One night I got so hammered I cracked my head open and went to hospital. I had to take him in. Cost me €100. Then we got into this wicked fight. He got us into a fight. We ended up in a police cell. I can't wait till next time. Never again.
Want to remember your holiday for the right reasons? Don't ruin it for you and your mates.
If you'd like more information, go to gov.uk/knowbeforeyougo or follow FCO Travel on Facebook or Twitter.
My phone call. I want to call my Emily.
Too late now. Please, please, please.
Step through now, please.
Oh, no.
Too late now.
Here's the goods. You take them in false bottom bag, you strap them to your body, it's up to you.
Look, I've changed my mind. I want out.
Too late now.
So, you're offering me a free holiday?
Yeah.
I just have to bring back something for a friend of yours.
That's right. You get some serious cash.
Right.
Well?
Not too late. Don't get talked into trafficking drugs. Once you're in, the British government can't get you out. Don't throw your life away.
Andrew Hill. Back to the Mothercare planning application now, and Councillor Sam Davey had a few concerns.
I notice one of the consultation responses from the Economic Development Department, they object to it. Are we just setting that aside? Paragraph 5 or sort of subsection 5, consultative responses, and the representation from Plymouth City Centre Company. I seem to remember they mentioned Next at Marsh Mills, and I do remember being on the planning committee at that point, and it at one point I think planning officers went out with Next to try and arrange a specific deal on that, but when they came back in, that deal kind of hadn't happened, and we went to the vote, and led by, I think, Councillor Kelly, who said Plymouth is open for business, and we decided that Next would be able to go there. One of the arguments that came up was that this would open floodgates, and it would appear that that might be so with this. I can understand that this is finely balanced, and I can understand the feeling of the Plymouth City Centre Company that this is, if not the opening of the floodgates, but at least part of a trickle that seems to be occurring. And I'm slightly worried about Plymouth itself. However, that said, I'm probably happy to go with the recommendation of the officers. There's only one thing, though. Suddenly out of nowhere, and I couldn't find it in the original condition, but suddenly there's a thing that said, for the avoidance of doubt, up to 10% of the gross internal area of Unit 1 may also be used as a cafe and or play area, which seems to be adding a slightly different flavour to that particular building, bearing in mind that there's already on site, sort of a standalone eatery. And I just wondered why that would have been included.
I'm going to ask Ali to comment, and maybe because it's ancillary or something, is it? I don't know.
Just because those details, obviously the letter of representation and consultation response were fully considered by officers, and they were part of the planning balance that we took into consideration. As I said, during the course of the application there was extensive discussions that took place with the applicants, and what you're seeing as a result of the new condition, restrictions which officers have sought to secure to make sure it's tied down as tightly as possible. The most significant concern to us as officers is the amount of non-bulky goods which are taking place in the premises, and we sought to tie those down as tightly as we can. In relation to part of the site being used for an additional cafe, that's unlikely to result in any significant difference to the impact of the proposal or play space, and is actually part of the kind of wider offer they're trying to do within the store. And we just felt it was most appropriate that as many different aspects of this proposal are tied down to make sure that what you're potentially going to grant consent for, if you agree with officers, is exactly what you're going to get, and that there aren't opportunities for other operators to go in there, which is why we've been really specific in the condition we've laid out now, to tie it down to make sure the likes of other operators that could have a really different impact, like TK Maxx, for example, or other operators who do have elements of bulky goods. We haven't considered those in the application, and as such we sought to make sure that the condition ties this down as significantly as we can to the evidence which we have provided.
Councillor David, do you want?
Just the worry about that, and I can see that you're shoehorning the conditions to satisfy a particular client on a particular thing. The only trouble is that there are other areas within that site. If another retailer comes along and says, well, actually, they've got it. Why can't we have a change in the conditions to include a little bit? I'm just slightly worried that we are, even though you're going to tell me, no, we've tied it down, you are creating a precedent, and is that something that you've considered, or are people carefully sweeping that under the carpet at the moment?
The potential implications of any planning application are something that we as officers obviously need to consider. We also need to consider the evidence that we're presented with and how that complies with the national policy tests. And while in an ideal world, I think we'd like all our bulky goods retail parks to be purely bulky goods, the vast majority of them simply aren't. The conditions which were imposed on the original planning permission here are some of the most onerous bulky goods conditions that are probably out there in the marketplace. And I think it's a strong positive of this site that 3 of the units are going to be fully in accordance with that. We do need to take on board what's been said in the application, and officers are obviously minded to what can potentially happen, but every single planning application needs to be considered on its merits and the evidence which is presented. And when you consider that evidence against both the national and local policies, the consideration in this instance is that they've complied with those requirements, and what officers have therefore sought to do is tie it down to what's been applied for and to limit it so that other occupiers couldn't potentially come in that would alter that impact. Lots of the bulky goods retail parks around the city do have units which sell things which aren't bulky. The PC World unit jumps out immediately. You can buy lots of things there which aren't necessarily bulky, and obviously B&M have gone into the Coypill retail park. But when we're considering each application, we are considering the evidence, and we are trying to restrict them as significantly as we can. But if the evidence that applications are putting forward demonstrate that they do comply with the policy requirements, officers need to consider that in the recommendations we give to you as members.
At the end of Plympton Academy's Celebration of Success Night, school principal Lisa Borman spoke about the meaning of excellence in the context of the Academy and its students.
Excellence isn't just about high grades. It's not just about the grades that you get at the end of your year 11 or year 13, or even your end of year exams in year 7. Excellence is more than that. It goes beyond the classroom. It goes beyond your family. It's about an inner ability that you have to seek excellence in everything you do. To be able to cope with a changing environment, to be able to solve problems on your own, and also to be well equipped for the future, whatever that may throw at you. The students here tonight, our Year 7 and our Year 8 students, have a burning desire to learn and to be successful and to demonstrate excellence in everything they do. And that is why they have achieved the awards they have achieved tonight. To demonstrate excellence, they need to be disciplined. They need to show diligence. They need to be in school. They need to make sure their work is completed. They need to be conscientious. And they demonstrate all of those attributes that give them the opportunity to be the PE team of the year or the mathematician of the year. And it's great to see so many different students achieving such different awards. They're also very often our lead learners in class, where they believe in the principle that to teach is to learn twice. They teach and support others so that they can become better themselves. And we see this in sport, we see this in classes, where our students are supporting others constantly. It's been great this week. We've had our new Year 7s up, lots of Year 6s, biggest year group, running around, chaos everywhere. And our students, the Year 7 students, the Year 8 students sitting here as well, have been absolute ambassadors for the Academy. They have helped, they have supported, and they have nurtured those students so that their fears in September are no longer going to haunt them through the summer. And they're an absolute credit to their families and the Academy. Students that seek excellence set high targets for themselves. They're often not happy in achieving things that for some people may take a lifetime to achieve. They challenge themselves, they ensure that they only accept the best. And that strive for excellence will come through in all of their aspects of life, particularly within their work that they will go on to do and their studies. It involves putting high quality into everything that they do. And this is what separates those high achievers from the people who will do well. Excellence isn't a skill, it's an attitude. Excellence is about doing your best, and the students here tonight have demonstrated that excellence. And I'd like you to join me in just congratulating them again on their achievements.
Now to the third part of my interview with Ian Curzon-Berners, chairman of the Plympton Fuchsia and Geranium Group. He told me how this year's show had prompted a number of new membership inquiries.
This is the main thing, again, what we as a group tend to rely on. I mean, it's nice to see people come to the show, but obviously if we get them as members, all well and good, that's what we're here for, that's what we need to get. Because obviously each group does tend to sort of like go down all the time, and what we need to do is bring people back up again. And this year especially has been exceptionally good. I mean, we've had, I think when I spoke to the lady on the door, it was about 8 new members. And 8 new members, I mean, on average, I think each year in the past we've had about 2, maybe 3. So 8 new members is really, I'm pleased with that. I'm very pleased.
Okay, and if people are listening to this think, well, I might be interested in getting in touch and having a go at becoming a member with a view to exhibiting next year, how do they do that?
Well, they can literally come along on any of our club nights. I mean, we meet at Harewood House every second Tuesday of the month, and that is from 7:30 till 9:30 roughly. I mean, we do overrun sometimes, it's not too bad though. And it is, I mean, apart from joining us, the best thing to do is come along on the night and see whether you like it. It will cost you £1.50 to come in and just sort of like see generally how you like it. If you don't like it from there, there's not a great deal lost. But if you want to carry on from there, you can become a member and work from that and hopefully win some trophies. And you will sort of give them advice and tips and pointers as to what to do. Yeah, the thing is each night they come along, obviously once a month, and majority of the time we have some really good speakers, and not only do they talk about fuchsias and pelargoniums, they also talk about different varieties of gardening, different plants. So there's a big variety of things that people can come in and sit down and learn about. And also, as well as the second Tuesday, we do the third Tuesday, which is run as a masterclass, which is open to any of the members. And what they do is just open up one of the rooms next door to the main hall, and literally it's more of a hands-on experience. I mean, it's a really good thing that people can get. And do I gather you do trips from time to time as well, looking at gardens? We do trips. We've not done that many this year because obviously there's so many different things going on, but I mean, we are quite a friendly group and we want to make sure that people enjoy what they do. Sometimes we go down to Cornwall, different garden centres and things like that, so we do different bits and pieces as well. OK, well, Ian, congratulations on another excellent show here today, and we look forward to another one next year. My pleasure. Thank you for coming along. Now to the conclusion of the debate on the Mothercare-related planning application for the new unit they are interested in at Marsh Mills. Councillor Johnny Morris also had some concerns he wished to vent.
I'm glad that Sam asked about the cafe aspect, because it's just sort of thrown in. And there doesn't seem to have been any analysis at all on the additional impact of the cafe space here, either on the rest of the site or on having a cafe in this unit on the city centre. That seems odd. The other thing is that in the condition, there's 2 questions, I think. First of all, it says that the maximum cumulative area to be used for the sale of the above products shall not exceed 799 square metres. Well, that's well over half the current size of the store, and almost bang on half even if the mezzanine does eventually get built, because that would give a total floor space of 1,617 square metres. So, with the addition of the cafe, which could therefore be up to 160 square metres, that means that the primary purpose of the store, bulky goods, is 40%. And I don't understand how the primary purpose, and with the reason that we had the big argument about Next, and the reason that there was big arguments about this whole site, was the fact that it's suitable for bulky goods and not in direct competition with city centre type outlets. But 60% of this is not bulky goods. And I don't understand how that can be ancillary to the primary purpose. I can appreciate we can have arguments about whether there is an adverse impact or a significant adverse impact. That's dancing on the head of a pin. But I don't see how, if over half the store is not bulky goods, it's not in direct and significant competition with the city centre. It just seems a nonsense. The particular question as well is that within the above products listed 1 to 5, so number 1 clothing, footwear, down to number 5 soft furnishings, including duvets, rugs, blah blah. Some of them have a specified maximum square meterage. So toys, games and party and play equipment for a maximum area of 93 square metres, but soft furnishings, including duvets, blah blah blah, doesn't have a maximum area associated with it. So that actually, I just didn't understand why some of those subsections had a limit and some of them didn't, and also how ancillary goods can make up more than half of the primary purpose of what the store was envisaged to be when the planning application, the original planning application, was originally granted.
I think if I can just come back to those points, because I think Councillor Morris has raised a number of very significant issues here, and I'll try and just kind of go through them as we do. The additional goods they're looking to sell are additional, they're not ancillary. You're quite right in the amount of floor space that they take up. When we're applying the sequential test, which is one of the key requirements about where the unit's going to go, the key consideration there is, are there any sites which are available? Are they readily available for them to go into, and are they suitable for the proposed use? And you're completely correct. There is a large amount of this store which isn't bulky goods, but there is also a significant proportion of it which is bulky goods, and that does have some very specific requirements associated with it, which I've set out in the report. And I think one of the things to draw a parallel with the application next versus this one is, if Mothercare were to go into that's one of these retailers who you can go into a store and you buy the bulky item and you need to take it to your car. In relation to Next and a number of the other bulky goods operators, principally things like Currys and Comet and things where they're still in existence, a lot of the things you ordered got delivered home. So that requirement to have the adjacent car parking wasn't as significant. And so there are requirements, which are principally associated with bulky goods that do give officers reason to consider they should be considered. In relation to the impact and why the condition's worded the way it is, it's directly related to the impact of the proposal. The coffee shop element of that, if that is included in the store, is unlikely to have anywhere as significant financial impact on the city centre as other elements of these additional goods. And the reason you've got those floor space restrictions added into there is because the ones that we have the most significant concern about are in relation to clothes, and they are in relation to the use of toys. They generate a significant amount of kind of value that has potential to have a higher impact, and so we've sought to restrict those within the wider offer. And when we did have the Next application before members, part of the reason we considered that one did have a significant adverse impact was because that very high amount of clothing sales in there. So we've been keen to reduce that amount within this application and then make it specific to a particular target group. So it's not the fashion aspect of clothing which gave rise to such significant concern last time round. In relation to the total floor space, yes, it is a high amount, but this planning application that this is seeking to alter has some slightly specific conditions on it which allow a ground floor area for the retail units, but it allows them to have mezzanines up to a very high level of additional floor space in them that is only controlled by virtue of the total amount of area in the floor space. So this unit could potentially have a complete full level mezzanine in it, doubling the floor space, which could be used for the sale of goods. But those aren't conditions which are for consideration. It's this kind of wider balance we've had to try and bring in here.
Can I just come back on that last point?
The last point.
Because I do, and I appreciate, and thank you for the answer, very good. But it's on this cafe aspect, which is in the application before us, relating to your last point, it says up to 10% of the gross internal area may also be used as a cafe and or play area. There isn't a square meterage limit on that. So in the future, as you say, there could be almost a whole other floor. You could have a vast destination cafe stroke play area, which, being 10% of the total rather than having a square metre limit, would you know, and I didn't understand why that is a percentage as opposed to a limit on the area, as in with the other goods. Would it not be possible to, say, have up to 10% of the gross internal area of Unit 1, i.e. 160 square metres or whatever, as it is in the original application, to take away that possibility of that side expanding? Do you see what I mean?
Just to come back on that point, as I said, in the presentation, officers have had significant negotiations with the applicant, and that has involved the potential occupier. The wording of the condition, as is set out now, is as far as the applicants were willing to go. In relation to the cafe, the next application is going to have a cafe in it. This site's already got a drive-through identified for it, as which the previous plan showed Costa Coffee. There's another hot drink takeaway already on the site. The implications of those in relation to the impact on the city centre are nowhere near as significant as the role of clothing and other comparison goods. And, you know, whatever floor space was to be occupied by a cafe, it would mean the reduction in other areas of sales, which, as far as I'm concerned, in relation to the retail impact, would only be a positive, because they would reduce the amount of other goods in the unit.
Okay. I think, you know, as a general thing, a lot of retailers want cafes within their premises, which 5 years ago, probably there wouldn't have been a demand, but we are in that sort of environment and people sort of expect it. So I think it's a reasonable concept that many stores have, and that's a matter of my opinion, and that's reality. Now, we're going to move to the vote.
And when it was put to the vote, councillors agreed to amend the restrictions, and Mothercare are now set to move to Marsh Mills once the new store is built. Well, alas, that's it for another edition. Hope you found it informative. Production music has been kindly provided by audionautics.com. Don't forget to follow our Facebook and Twitter pages for regular updates of Plympton-related news and events. And until the next time, thanks for listening, and bye for now.
The Plympton Podcast.